Good afternoon, Professor Mohamad Al-Ississ. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thanks.
Good. Thank you for joining us here at the Belfer Center. I wanted to ask you, your research talks about globally integrated markets and political violence that causes the substitution of financial and economic activities away from afflicted countries and towards more stable ones. This process magnifies the negative impacts of violence on afflicted countries. What can be done to overcome this economic process?
Thank you, Zane, for this opportunity. We live today in highly competitive financial markets with well-integrated technology where money moves with a click of a button to the ends of the world. And investors faced with money destinations have become increasingly more demanding in their choices for destinations for their investment. So when you look at the Arab world today, after the Arab Spring and during the previous wars that took place in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Gaza, it becomes harder to convince investors that this destination will deliver for them in terms of high return and low variability in their expected return. So when a violent event happens, say, or an unstabilizing event, so say the Arab Spring, investors grow increasingly worried about whether they should keep their money there or not. You notice that money right after such an event will move away from the hit destination. But where it ends at is actually interesting. Some of that money is reallocated completely out of the region. So you have international institutional investors pulling their money out of the Arab world to alternative destinations. But then you have regional investments coming from the Gulf countries, which want to stay in the region because of either familiarity with the region or lower transaction costs of maintaining it in the region. And therefore, it will reallocate to other areas within the region. So that is actually promising. There is very little you can do, perhaps, about decreasing the level of violence as a policymaker. But let's say you're a country within an unstable neighborhood, you can make that country more interesting for investors that want to stay in the region but want safer havens by offering more certainty in terms of the institutions, in terms of security for their investments, in terms of agreements with international institutions to provide insurance for these investments. So there are things that can be done. That's the good news. And you have to work hard at it to convince investors that there is high return in unstable countries.
And now you're beginning to research the institutional and behavioral constraints on economic development in the Middle East. What, in your opinion, are the primary constraints? Right. What can be done to overcome these adverse incentives?
Right. If you look at the Arab world, initially it might be puzzling. Why isn't there more development taking place there? Why isn't it growing at faster rates? You have a high level of concentration, natural resources, oil and what have you. You have young and dynamic population. The demographics of the Arab world such that perhaps as high as 30% of the population is below the age of 25. Well-educated population, at least quantitatively. In terms of numbers. So you'd expect more dynamic development, more inclusive development to be taking place. But unfortunately, what we observe is the opposite. And in my opinion, it has to do with the fact that a lot of the growth that has been taking place has been what you may label as exclusive growth. Growth that has benefited the few, not the many. And that's at heart of the social instability that took place over the past few years. The region, I think one of the main constraints facing development in the Arab world is institutional certainty. If you ask me today, where is a certain country in the Arab world headed in the next 6 months, it is a tough question. Investors, when they make their long-term investments, need to plan ahead, need to know what risks they face, at what probability, what is the downside of their investment in addition to the upside. And without offering them institutional certainty, where Egypt is headed, where the Syrian problem will end up, what is the spillover effects of intra-regional violence or instability, it's going to be very hard to ultimately achieve long, sustainable investments that are at the engine of long-term growth. That's the first obstacle, institutional certainty in systems of governance. The other main obstacle that the region faces is raising the human capital capabilities of its population. So as I said, quantitatively, the region looks like it has well-educated population. But then if you look more at qualitative measures of education, you find that the region is falling far behind its peers in the world in terms of the quality of education that it offers. More investments need to be directed at primary level education, at education that is that challenges the young minds to question, to analyze, rather than the traditional way of teaching through memorization and what have you. So I'd say institutional certainty and human capital quality of education.
So you mentioned human capital, and I'm glad you did. When we're looking at development, it's impossible not to look at the role of education. And as you know, Queen Rania visited Harvard last year, and she outlined her desire for building educational capacity, not only in Jordan, but in the region in general. What impacts have the latest attempts at educational reform had on the region?
The region has tried a number of initiatives when it came to education, but these initiatives have been really more classical approaches focused at massive investments, increasing the number of schools. A lot of the investments that go into the education in the region go into physical infrastructure in education. And sadly, the region has really fallen behind on all main qualitative measures. If you look at cross-country comparisons and quality of education, I think yes, we need to meet the high demand of that the demographic challenge we're facing in the region of building this infrastructure. But more and more investments need to be directed into thinking out of the box in terms of new solutions for education. So I'm glad you mentioned the Queen Rania initiative. I've been involved and will be starting filming the first Arab massive open online course soon here while at the Kennedy School, aimed at delivering high quality education to populations using technology, using the internet. All you need now is a fast connection. If you live in Cairo or Marrakesh or wherever, you can access high quality education regardless of the fees that you're able to pay or the access to physical schools in certain cities that you're able to meet. And I think we need more and more of these initiatives that are using and integrating new technologies into the educational arena. Of course, this space is new. It's upcoming. So Harvard has its EDX. There are other portals that are faced at delivering high quality education, but really we know very little about where the space is headed. However, I'm glad the region is being actively involved in this space. I've talked to entrepreneurs who are considering other solutions in education, perhaps business-to-business services that are focused on vocational training using modern internet technology and what have you. Again, this is a new space. We need to be part of it. We need to be trying new solutions because the old ones, frankly, have failed. And we need to make it our focus. Another area where the region needs to focus on is substituting investments in infrastructure to investments in teacher and human capitals, raising the potential for teachers, making education an attractive profession so that it attracts good minds that are able to deliver. This requires a massive institution transformation in the institutional arena, but it also requires opening up to entrepreneurs who are able and willing to use new technology to deliver education services.
Shifting gears a little bit, your most recent research is about polarization and preferences in the Arab world. I was wondering if you could expand on that research.
Right. Right at the Arab Spring and after it, we have all witnessed the massive rifts that have taken place in societies across the Arab world. Some of the what we consider the most homogeneous countries in the region, such as Egypt, have witnessed great societal divisions and rifts. And actually, very interestingly, in a recent poll, the World Economic Forum that the World Economic Forum conducted among its experts worldwide, polarization in Arab societies was named as the #1 risk facing the world in the coming year. This is a tall order. We have not yet understood what's driving it. What are its causes? Is it demographics that is driving the risk, these rifts? Is it grievances from socioeconomic deteriorating situations? Or is it preferences and demands for democratic systems of rule that are driving it? We simply have not invested enough in trying to understand it, and without achieving a deep understanding of what's driving this polarization in Arab society, if it exists really in the data, we cannot prescribe solutions for it. So this is a work that I've just started, really looking at what is the Arab world polarized about, if at all. Along what axes is this polarization happening? Is it along religious preferences? Is it along the youth bulge that's taking place? Or is it really where the Arab world needs to be or should be at this level in its democratic development and its institutional and economic development? And we're just more aware of it now because more Arabs are able to voice their opinion. So this is the work that I'm currently undertaking now, and it is my hope that we'll be able to have a better understanding of what many have described as really the dissolvement of the fabric of society in the Arab world that's taking place. It is a dangerous trend, and if it really manifests itself in the data, we need to understand how can we best address it.
Some of this polarization has led to low-intensity conflict in some countries, and there are areas where economic development is happening where there is a high risk of political violence. I'm thinking, of course, about the Gaza Strip. Why is economic development taking place in areas with more low-intensity conflict than areas that have less?
Right. So when it comes to violence, an important area to look at is not simply the intensity of violence, but the threshold of desensitization to this violence. So if you live in Gaza City, instability has been, unfortunately, sadly, part of your life for the past few decades. And life goes on. You get desensitized to it one way or another. You need to put bread on the table for your family. You need to invest. A lot of the infrastructure has been destroyed by the continued violence and wars that have taken place, sadly, there, and needs to be rebuilt. Versus if you lived in a city which has been historically stable with low rates of violence. Take Cairo. Cairo, on a per capita basis, perhaps is one of the safest cities on earth, except for petty crime or what have you. Yet, as a result of the upsurge in societal tension that has taken place over the couple of past years, people have been extremely concerned, and a lot of investors have pulled back on investing in the region, mainly because they have not been used to that level. So part of it is expected threshold and desensitization to violence. Part of it is you need to make up for the destroyed physical capital that has afflicted the area, such as Gaza, because of the wars. And part of it is Gaza happens to be has one of the highest urban densities in the world, and where you have a concentration of urban densities, even if it's poor, as a lot of recent research in economics shows, there is opportunity for investment, there is opportunity for thriving startups and businesses to take place to capitalize on the demands that such a high urban population demands.
Great. Professor Al-Ississ, thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure. Appreciate it.